Ovid's lichen is the origin of the modern werewolf, as the physical manipulation of his body hinges on his prior immoral behavior. It is this that has contributed to the establishment of the monstrous werewolf trope of modern fiction. So Ovid is responsible for like the monstrous werewolf. Lycan's character defects are physically grafted onto his body, manipulating his human form until he becomes that which his behavior suggests. And perhaps most importantly, Lycan begins the idea that to transform into a werewolf, you must first be a monster. We're gonna be starting a new series, horror, lore, and all the more, because Teen Wolf really is just a landing pad for mystical creatures. That's what we're really talking about here. And so I feel like some of you guys really just resonated with the characters and the human side of them. And then I know there's a whole demographic out there that I think we haven't really gotten into the mystic, the lore, the horror of Teen Wolf. We are going to be diving into a bigger conversation of Teen Wolf versus today's conversation is going to be the ancient origins of the werewolf. For those that don't know and want to know the history of werewolfism, buckle up. We're going to give you the ultra OG ancestral prequel that led to Teen Wolf. Storytime, kids. The werewolf is a staple of supernatural fiction, whether it be film, television, or literature. You might think this snarling creature is a creation of the medieval and early modern periods, a result of the superstition surrounding magic and witchcraft. In reality, the werewolf is far older than that. Quick pause on that, because my first real connection to the werewolf creature, if so to speak, I think was in The Witch. I loved The Witch. Who is a fan of The Witch? I remember there was some kind of like creature in the woods allure about that actually made me feel like the werewolf was real. Like I believed it. And I think it was what you didn't see on camera. So yeah, any fans of The Witch, like let's have a conversation about that. Like that should be a forum. So the earliest surviving example of man to wolf transformation is actually found in the Epic of the Gilgamesh. I hope I am not mispronouncing that. The Epic of Gilgamesh from around 2100 BC. Those are some old werewolf bones. However, the werewolf, as we know, it first appeared in ancient Greece and Rome in the ethnographic, poetic, and philosophical texts. I would love someone to do a rendition of 2100 BC Werewolf Man. That's what I want to see. That's so interesting. The Epic of Gilgamesh, see again, I should have done my homework. I don't even know what that is. I'm assuming it's biblical. I don't think it was like a book in the Old Testament or New Testament, but 2100 BC, that's gotta be Old Testament, right? We've got some help coming in, I've called a friend.
Insane.
The Epic of Gilgamesh, Olivia had mercy on me, is an epic poem from ancient Mesopotamia. The literary history of Gilgamesh begins with 5 Sumerian poems about Gilgamesh. We already lost you guys, because just hang in there. King of Uruk, some of which may date back to the 3rd dynasty of Ur, 2100 BC. These independent stories were later used as source material for a combined epic in Akkadian. The first surviving version of this combined epic, known as Old Babylonian version, dates back to the 18th century BC and is titled after its incipit, is that the right way to read that? Shatur el-Shari, surpassing of all of the kings, only a few tablets of it have survived. The later standard Babylonian version compiled of something I'm not going to try to pronounce because it's the Sin-Lakui dates to somewhere between the 13th to the 10th centuries BC that bears the incipit, another thing I cannot pronounce. He who saw the depths, the deep. He who sees the unknown. Approximately 2/3 of this longer 12-tablet version has been recovered. Some of the best copies were discovered in the library ruins of the 7th century BC Assyrian king. And another word I cannot pronounce, Ashurbanipal. But yeah, Mesopotamia on a tablet. That's pretty cool. He was a wild man created by the gods to stop Gilgamesh from oppressing the people of Uruk. After Enkidu became civilized through sexual initiation, that's how people are made, with Shebhat, he travels to Uruk. He challenges Gilgamesh to test the strength. Gilgamesh wins the contest. Nonetheless, the two become friends. This is like another day for another time, but that's so interesting that it was made on a tablet, essentially, and it was forming a prototype for later heroes like Hercules. So yeah, Hercules and werewolf come out of the Epic of Gilgamesh. Who knew? Later influence, relationship to the Bible. There's characters in the Hebrew Bible that have been suggested to correlate with the Epic of Gilgamesh. So yeah, this goes back, guys. These stories of the transformed beast are usually mythological, although some have a basis in local histories, religions, and cults. In 425 BC, we're gonna need like a map graphic here. This is like the most technical we've gone so far, guys. Greek historian Herodotus, Herodotus. This is just gonna be me screwing up words. Describe the Nuri, a nomadic tribe of magical men who changed into wolf shapes for several days of the year. Why isn't there a movie about this? The Nuri, that's so interesting. It's a nomadic tribe of magical men in 425 BC who changed into wolf shapes for several days of the year. The Nuri were from Sikatha, land that is now part of Russia. Guys, we had like OG Russians playing werewolves for the first time? That's interesting. But using wolf skins for warmth is not outside the realm of possibility for inhabitants of such harsh climate. This is likely the reason Herodotus, we're gonna call him that, described their practice as transformation. The werewolf myth became integrated with the local history of Arcadia, a region of Greece. So here, Zeus was worshipped as Lycan Zeus, which is translated to wolf Zeus. Guys, we got 2100 BC, we got 425 BC, now we have 380 BC. Greek philosopher Plato told a story in the Republic about the protector turned tyrant of the shrine of Lycan Zeus. Okay, in this short passage, the character Socrates, the story goes that he who tastes of the, what is this? Cold read, guys. Socrates remarks, the story goes that he who tastes of the one bit of human enrails minced up whose though with those of other victims. You guys are reading along, be like, I can read this better than you, Holland. The story goes that he who tastes of the one bit of human entrails minced up with those of other victims is inevitably transformed into a wolf. I repeat, the story goes that he who tastes of the one bit of human entrails minced up with those of the other victims is inevitably transformed into a wolf. It's very poetic. There should have been like a Shakespeare werewolf story. I don't think there is. Please comment if I'm wrong. So literary evidence suggests cult members mixed human flesh into their ritual sacrifice to Zeus. Both Pliny the Elder and Pausanias discuss the participation of a young athlete. This is the hardest reading lesson ever. Democritus in the Arcadian sacrifice of an adolescent boy. When Democritus was compelled to taste the entrails of a young boy, some like Catholic priest stuff, he was transformed into a wolf for 9 years. Recent archaeological evidence suggests that human sacrifice may have been practiced at this site. This is some real dark road we're traveling, kids. The monsters and men, the most interesting aspect of Plato's passage concerns the protector turned tyrant, also known as the mythical king Lycan. Expanded further in Latin texts, most notably continues to be hard words, Hyginus's Fabulae and Ovid's Metamorphoses. Please, if you can do better, you should reread this article on the internet, and they can replace your words over my mouth. Lycan's story contains all the elements of modern werewolf tale: immoral behavior, murder, and cannibalism, as one does. In fable, the sons of Lycan sacrifice their youngest brother to prove Zeus's weakness. They serve the corpse on a pseudo-feast and attempting to trick the god into eating it. Furious Zeus slayed the sons with lightning bolt and transformed their father into a wolf. In Ovid's version, Lycan murdered and mutilated a protected hostage of Zeus, but suffered the same consequences. Ovid's passage is one of the only ancient sources that goes into detail on the act of transformation. His description of the metamorphosis uses haunting language that creates a correlation between Lycan's behavior and the physical manipulation of his body. So really, Greek mythology came up with werewolves. Yeah, I had no idea that it went this deep. But Ovid's Lycan is the origin of the modern werewolf, as the physical manipulation of his body hinges on his prior immoral behavior. It is this that has contributed to the establishment of the monstrous werewolf trope of modern fiction. So Ovid is responsible for like the monstrous werewolf. Lycan's character defects are physically grafted onto his body, manipulating his human form until he becomes that which his behavior suggests. And perhaps most importantly, Lycan begins the idea that to transform into a werewolf, you must first be a monster. The idea that there is this link between biology and immoral behavior developed fully. Now we're on the Teen Wolf track, 20th century. However, minority groups were more often the target than mythical kings. I love how like the werewolf was reserved for like the royalty, like the top of the top. And then in the 20th century, it became like marginalized groups or like the outcasts that went through this monstrous transformation. I do wonder why that would be. Law enforcement, scientists, and the medical community joined forces to find cures for socially deviant behaviors such as criminality, violence, and even homosexuality. I have a theory, kids. I think the reason it became marginalized groups in the 20th century, that's when modern cities were starting to be formed. Like people were living closer together, more rules were being created. There's the me versus them. You put a lot of people together in a tight space, I think tempers start to flare. And that was some of the earliest evidence of modern cities as we come to know them, as, with like public city works and sewers, the modernity of a city as we know it. So I think that's potentially, maybe it was like a scarlet letter, so to speak. Perhaps that's why like law enforcement, scientists, and medical community joined forces to find cures for the socially deviant behavior. Yeah, I think exclusion is like such a big topic in cities that still remains today. You know, you put the highways through bad parts of town, and there's so many ways of like segregating people that the werewolf was sort of the first scarlet letter. So science and medicine were used as a vehicle through which bigotry and fear, could be maintained, as shown by the treatment of HIV-affected men through the 1980s. That's a stretch. Wait, what? Science and medicine were used as a vehicle through which bigotry and fear could be maintained, as shown by the treatment of HIV. Yes, a lot of bigotry and fear did surround the 1980s with the AIDS epidemic. So science and medicine, it's almost like the earliest infomercial where like you find out that people saying that cheese is good for you by the government. It turns out the cheese industry paid those politicians to say that. I think that's like the first evidence of that. It's like, oh, in science and medicine, when it says law enforcement, scientists, and the medical community joined forces to find cures for the socially deviant behavior, that's like your first lobbyist action. And then you obviously saw that with the AIDS epidemic, where so much of misinformation was being passed around about how you can contract AIDS. However, werewolf stories show the idea has ancient origins. For as long as authors have been changing bad men into wolves, we have been looking for the biological link between man and action. That's really interesting. I kind of thought werewolves had kind of been like combed over narratively, but I actually think there's a movie there. So what do you think? Should we make like weird werewolf history merch? That's something I have never seen before. I think you guys maybe might like it. Let me know. We're totally open to making something like that, but that would be cool. You guys have way better ideas on that stuff than me, so let us know what kind of merch you guys want to see. Your own personalized merch, totally doable, ship worldwide, no crazy customs, no crazy shipping fees. So here's the first passage that Ovid described the transformation. So the first werewolf transformation passages. He tried to speak, but his voice broke into an echoing howl. His ravening soul infected his jaws. His murderous longings were turned on the cattle, and he was still possessed by bloodlust. His garments were changed to a shaggy coat, and his arms into legs. He was now transformed into a wolf. Even like a passage of that on a t-shirt. His ravening soul infected his jaws. Yeah, I think Jeff Davis would be impressed by this article. He does so much research though, I wouldn't be shocked if he actually knew this. I wanna ask him, like, where do you think the first tropes of a werewolf were mentioned? The first idea of a werewolf was mentioned? I don't think he's gonna say 2100 BC, but I could be wrong. Yeah, let us know.